Yeah, right now I'm listening. Hello, everyone. I see Rakesh Baiji is there. Can you hear me? It says chat disconnected. Is that me or him?
I don't know. But it seems like the live is working on this.
Well, if anyone is there, then hello and namaste. We'll just wait. See, Rakesh Baiji was here. It seems like there might be some technical difficulties. It said the chat is disconnected. So just in case anyone is here with me, we'll just wait. I'm sure Rakesh Baiji, Rakesh brother is very on top of these matters and is figuring everything out properly. So just wait patiently. Do you think it would be worthwhile to reconnect?
I don't know if you can do. I don't know if we can just like refresh
or end stream and then do it again, or
please do it again later.
oh, okay. So I see some people are.
Okay, so here it works.
Is that what I'm on right now, or I'm confused?
Okay, I think it's good. It's just it doesn't work there.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Sound is good. Okay. So, hello to everyone. It looks like Rakesh brother, it looked like there was maybe some technical difficulties, maybe on my end or your end. If you can somehow just give me a thumbs up that all is still good, and then it can begin. Perfect. That's what I needed to hear. Great. So let me just get myself organized here. So hello and good morning and namaste to everyone. I'm very, very glad to be here today with all of you, and glad to be a part of this initiative of this amazing platform to bring people together to understand. Today we're going to be reading Jivan Vidya Ek Parichay. And what a beautiful day, or Jivan Vidya, an introduction, what a beautiful day to begin. I'm going to start with a song to wake me up in the morning and get me nice and ready. And I know that some of you are in places where where it's not morning, it's more evening, so I'll have a little song for you as well. This is a little song I sing with the children about waking up in the morning. Very simple. Good morning, everyone, under the sun, rising high in the sky. Today I'm gonna try my best to live with goodness, to care and share what I have. I'm gonna live happily in my family, be in harmony within me. Good morning, everyone, under the sun. Good morning, everyone, under the sun. Good morning, everyone, under the sun. And for those of you who are living in a more nighttime sort of place or evening sort of place, we'll have a good night one. Good night, everyone, under the moon, shining bright in the night. Below the light I lay, thinking of today and how I've cared and shared what I have. Gratitude I see deep within me for all of my family. Good night, everyone, under the moon. Good night, everyone, under the moon. Good night, everyone, under the moon. So good morning, good evening to everyone. What a beautiful way to wake up and be able to share in the reading together of an introduction written by A. Nagaraji, translated by Rakesh Gupta, brother. I'm waking up here. We live in Canada. My name is Naomi, by the way. We live in Canada in a forest setting. And you look outside, people come here all the time and they say, this place is so beautiful. It's got beautiful pine trees and open meadows. And people often say, this place is so beautiful. And I always say to them, yeah, the place is physically beautiful, but what really makes this place beautiful are the people, the relationships that are being fostered here, and the overall purpose with which we are moving forward together. So ultimately, what makes a day beautiful is when we're moving together towards resolution, towards understanding. That itself is beautiful. So I feel like today is a beautiful start because we are going to be able to share in the reading of an introduction by A. Nagaraji. So glad to be here. My name is Naomi, and I'm here in Canada right now in a small little town called Bragg Creek. That's where we live. I live here with my family. So I have my husband. We have 2 children. You would have met Spencer, brother, who did the session the other day, Estelle's sister, who did the session just before, Spencer, brother. And of course, we have Dr. Arthur Clark, who is a dear friend of ours and almost like a fatherly figure, and he also is extended member of our family who lives with us as well. And then, of course, we have extensions of family in different places, but that's who I'm currently living with right now in a family context. And I was born and raised in Canada, and I was first introduced to Madhyas Darshan, or the worldview of harmonious coexistence, in 2005 when I went to India. And I was fortunate enough to have met A. Nagaraj and all members of his family and his wife. And I was able to spend a considerable amount of time with them after both of our children were born. We got to live with A. Nagaraj, who is the author and author of this book that we're going to be sharing today, and also the propounder of the philosophy Madhyas Darshan. So after the birth of both of our children, we stayed and lived with him and his family. We were welcomed by them for maybe 5-6 months, 2 occasions and many other occasions. So today I want to express my very sincere gratitude to A. Nagaraji, his wife, who we called Mataji, and all members of his family for being a tremendous source of inspiration for me. And so I think I've gained so much by having the experience of being with A. Nagaraj and all members of his family. So extreme sense of gratitude there. I also want to express my gratitude for Rakesh, brother, and Priyanka, sister, for all of their important effort that's allowing me here to be today and sharing with all of you. And I think it's been a very important platform to bring people together from all across the world, because it's this year we're not only getting the opportunity for people in India together, but also for us here in Canada. In the next few days, we'll have Kevin, brother, who lives in Germany. So essentially, it's created this platform that brings us together for a deeper understanding of Madhyas Darshan. And it's provided an opportunity for so many people in the way of listening and striving to understand, and also for expressing what people are moving towards understanding. Today is kind of a new opportunity for me because often when I have done some sharing, often online or maybe when I've been in India, I have often used Hindi as a language, which is not my first language. And of course, we informally do sharing of around the philosophy here in English. But it's a different experience to go through the book and to read it in English, which is my first language, which I think is very, very helpful. And so I'm here as a student today who's in the process of understanding and striving to align my life accordingly with this worldview of harmonious coexistence. And it's been a tremendous and amazing and beautiful journey thus far. I also want to give thanks to all the people who've been a source of inspiration, who have helped me to progress in many ways, whether it be the people that I live with in my home, like my husband or the children or other brothers and sisters that I live with, whom daily I get the opportunity to live with and to progress in togetherness. And there's many other people who I really sincerely recognize as people who've supported my progress and who have participated in creating a more conducive environment for my study and ability to practice. So I'll be here for the next 4 days. And then after my sharing, we will move on to Kevin Brother, who will be in Germany. So glad to be here with all of you. Over the past few days, we had Estelle's sister who started the introduction, the main introduction of this book, and giving the whole journey of A. Nagaraji's life from his early years onward and his quest for understanding, and where that led him up to the point where he was able to share Madhyastashan with all of us. So it's the whole journey. Spencer, brother, had completed the section on introducing Jivan Vidya. And today I'm here and we're going to be looking at the constitution of Jivan. So essentially we're going to be looking at what is the makeup of Jivan and what is Jivan. So we will begin here and begin our exploration together. So we're beginning today at the top of section, it's page 64, sorry. And it's the title is The Constitution of Jivan. So we're going to start there. All right. The Constitution of Jivan. Jivan is an inseparable form of man, vritti, chit, buddhi, and atma. These 5 parts never separate from one another. Man has 2 functions, activities, taste, ashvadan, and selection, chayan. The 2 functions of vritti are deliberation, tulan, and analysis, vishleshan. Chit has 2 functions, contemplation, chintan, and visualization, chitran. The 2 functions of buddhi are understanding, bodh, and conviction, sankalp. The 2 functions of atma are realization, anubhav, and authenticity, pramanikta. Every jivan is continuously working with these 10 activities. The activities of jivan manifest either as delusion or awakening. Until delusion, jivan functions based on sensitivity, wherein only 4.5 of its 10 activities are affected. It doesn't have the basis for understanding the remaining 5.5 activities, and this is the reason of internal conflict in jivan, while it is in the purview of delusion. The 4.5 activities are selection, taste, analysis, visualization, and half of deliberation. Herein, sensitivity becomes the basis of taste and selection activities of jivan. This means that one selects that which feels good from senses, so hearing, touching, tasting, seeing, and smelling, and leaves out which doesn't feel good, whereby jivan performs the activity of deliberation for the sake of sensitivity, seeking likeness, health, and profit. One does analysis in the same way, and the visualization also gets done in the same way. In summary, we become inclined to live while believing that our consciousness is the sensory perception itself. This itself is the state of delusion of jivan, wherein one remains in continuous internal conflict, one keeps struggling to decide between right and wrong, between less and more. Human being may have accomplished a great deal materially, but their mental state is no different from that of primitive humans. The mental state of humanness requires awakening of the remaining 5.5 activities of Jivan, which happens by right understanding. So I want to first start off by saying, and I think Spencer Brother has alluded to this and he's expressed it, but I will express it once again. This is a new discovery of A. Nagaraj. And the new discovery is that Jivan is a constitutionally complete atom. In order to understand this a little bit better, I think what I'll do is I'll give us a little bit of a context of the tradition in which A. Nagaraj was born in. As we know from reading the text earlier when Estelle's sister was sharing, A. Nagaraj was raised in a small village in the south part of India in a home of Vedic scholars. So they were using the Vedic scriptures as their source of kind of knowledge. And in the Vedic scriptures, it was termed, if you were to look at Jivan, you would say that there's man, buddhi, chit, ahankar. And those together form something called the subtle body. So we've got this gross body, and then there's this which is this physical body, and then we've got the subtle body, which is again man, buddhi, chit, ahankar. Okay, and the atma is Brahm itself. Okay, and atma is in bondage because it is now in that subtle body, and it's entered into the subtle body, and it needs to be liberated. Okay, but here, what A. Nagaraj is saying is completely different. It's a paradigm shift in thinking. Here, Jivan is a constitutionally complete atom with 5 inseparable components. We're not saying that Atma is separate. Atma is inseparable with all the other components, which are man, vritti, buddhi. Now I want to say the other one, man, vritti, chitta, buddhi, and Atma. Okay, so those are the 5 activities of Jivan. And here, they're all inseparable from each other, and they work hand in hand. And we'll go into that quite a bit later. A. Nagaraj will talk about it in depth. But so as you can see, A. Nagaraj is also using some of the similar terms. If you just look at the word itself, he's got the word man, he's got the word buddhi, chit. So some of the same words are utilizing, but we have to understand each word when he's utilizing it has a very distinct meaning in relation to the coexistence. So as we're continuing to read in this process, we need to be able to understand everything with its distinct meaning, which is rooted in the reality, which is rooted in coexistence, okay? So what he's trying to say, what I believe he's trying to say here, is that human being, as of now, humanity, as we are living right now with our minimum potential. We haven't lived up to this greater potential that we have, and maybe we're not even aware of what is that greater potential that we have. And what is that minimal potential? 4.5 activities. So just as an example, I'm not very technologically savvy, but just a very basic example here is just a number of years ago, I had a cell phone. I need to use it for a particular purpose. I tend to use a cell phone for a very particular function. I use it for WhatsApp or calling, just regular telephone calls. But the cell phone itself has many more functions that I'm not even aware of. And I'm not aware of it, thus I don't even know how to utilize it to its fullest, okay? I use it with very, very narrow, kind of minimal potential. So same thing, that's a very, very gross kind of concrete example, but same thing in terms of Jivan. We have this grand potential, which is to live with all 10 activities. We are only living in light of those 4.5 activities. And we're not even aware of the possibility of anything more, that there is anything more. And so that is one of the things that he's saying. And that another strong statement, what he's saying is that we're either living sensitivity-based living or intelligence-based living, okay? Sensitivity-based living is when we're investing all of our work, and our behavior work means when I'm investing my physical labor with everything in the environment around me, and behavior more interactions with people. So I'm investing any outer action I'm doing with my body, and investing it for the senses. So anything I'm doing, it's for sensory pleasure, sensory comfort, and there could be a whole range of what that looks like. It could be for just physical comfort. I could be using my relationships for that comfort, for sensory fulfillment, sensory pleasure. And so I'm investing all of that for sensitivity, for the senses. Whereas intelligence-based living is now when I'm living with knowledge, wisdom, and science. That becomes now the main driver, rather than sensory living and sensory focus being the main driver. Now knowledge, wisdom, and science becomes the main driver, which is a very different paradigm in human living, because now for the first time we're able to have our answers to essentially what, why, and how. Okay, so what is this existence? And then why has to do with purpose, setting the purpose, setting my direction. Now I've understood knowledge has to do with I'm understanding the existence as it is. Wisdom has to do with now I've set, according to that, I've recognized my aim, which is aligning with that existential purpose. And now I also know the steps to bring that aim into action. And I'll talk more about that going further. So in other words, that means awakening. And that means awakening has to do with awakening all 10 activities of Jivan. So there's no middle ground. It's either sensitivity-based living or intelligence-based living. Sometimes in the society, we tend to think I know a little bit less, I know a little bit more. And when we're getting to this point when we're having intelligence-based living, we now come to the point and we're free from more or less. It's very definite. Okay. When it's sensory-based living, there could be a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, a little bit less of this. But here we're talking about something that is free from more or less. So it's either body-based living or system-based living. Okay. So now, and so because we are living in light of sensitivity-based living, where senses are the main driver, we start to believe ourselves to be this body, or believe myself to be merely the one who just perceives the senses and not much more. I'm not able to see any larger purpose other than that. And this itself is delusion. Delusion is when I see myself something other than what it is in reality. So I see myself as this body, but in reality, I'm Jivan, which has these 10 activities, 10 conscious functions. And that itself is delusion, when I'm not able to understand that properly and live my life accordingly. And because of that, we don't know how to proceed with our lives when we're living sensitivity-based living. How do I make good decisions? Where do I go? What is good? All of those things haven't been defined properly. And without that definite purpose, definite aim, our life becomes kind of a mere experimentation and see where it goes, but without that sense of clarity. Agraj here was also talking about, which I think is very important, is that whatever human beings have accomplished up to this point in all of human history, we've done with 4.5 activities, whether it be all the architectural design, the comforts, the health progressions in terms of health and language that has been developed. All of those things have been developed only with, or have only come to be with 4.5 activities. So we've accomplished a lot materially, but our mental state has not improved. It's remained the same throughout all this time. And which is interesting, because if you talk with people, people will say, oh, the good old days, we should go back to the good old days. There was a time where human beings were living really, really well together, and a time where we were taking very good care of the environment, and we just need to go back to that time. But if you look at it carefully, if it was something that was really good, and then there would be a tradition of it. If human beings were able at that point to live justfully together and to ensure a healthy planet and to ensure harmonious living in our family, if we were able to have done that at that time, there would have ensured a tradition. And because there's no tradition of it, that means somewhere along the way there was something missing, which means it was still in purview of those 4.5 sensory-based activities. So now, and in that purview, those sensory-based activities, that sensitivity, there's no fulfillment point in it. So now we need to get to the point where we can have that fulfillment. And where will that lie? When we can awaken those 10 activities. And in the society, another aspect that I find is that sometimes we feel that inner lack or inner gap within ourselves, or inner longing, and sometimes we feel that that's because of my outer circumstances, or I need to change the place or this person or some external factor. But what we're saying here, what A. Nagaraji is saying, is that this is merely due to our inability to awaken those 10 activities. We're living in purview 4.5 activities in sensitivity-based living. So with that, there's no coordination between all of the activities of self, and they're not synchronized. And this is creating some internal conflict. So I think those are some important points to draw from what A. Nagaraj has said thus far. I think let's move forward with the reading. So the 4.5 activities of Jivan are sufficient for recognizing and responding to senses. But human being lives like an animal or a demon in their purview. It is not possible to live as a human being ought to live with only 4.5 activities. Such living doesn't lead to fulfillment. The main issue now is to evidence all 10 activities of Jivan in human behavior, which is awakening. Awakening cannot result from partial evidencing of Jivan. For example, a healthy body is when all the 5 sense organs and the 5 action organs function correctly with mutual coordination. If any of these don't function properly, then we can't call that person healthy. In the same way, all activities of Jivan need to function for awakening. So I'll just stop here for just one moment again. Again, he's trying to build that necessity of seeing the necessity for awakening and awakening those 10 activities. So if you see animals, they're governed by the senses. And thus, they're just governed by the senses. Everything is built into the body, and so they're obeying some laws and principles, and thus they're already participating harmoniously or in orderliness. And I can see, we live here, I walk the dogs daily. You can see that the animals are fully, every moment, just fully governed, using their senses every moment. Sense of smell, seeing what's going on around them, then listening. I hear the birds, I hear an animal coming after me, thinking about food and how it can just survive, essentially. And for an animal, living with senses, that is sufficient, because for an animal, there's just a need to survive. And in order to survive and maintain the body, it is merely enough to live in light of senses. And for an animal, they're fully living in balance, living with the senses. Yet for human beings, there's an innate want, or what A. Nagaraji says is dharma, which is something that is inseparable or innate to us. You cannot separate. And one thing you cannot separate from human beings is human beings, it's not just a matter of living as in animals. There's just a will to live. They want to live. For human being, it's living with happiness. So you cannot separate that from human being. There's a necessity, there's a need, there's an innate want to live with happiness. And for human beings, if we're living with sensitivity and our innate want is to be happy, that is not enough. And so we're kind of caught up in this cycle of confusion of trying to fulfill happiness through our senses and trying it in many different ways. And it's this whole cycle that in the end, what really is required is to activate all the Jivan's 10 activities. And now he's going to talk a little bit more how this can be accomplished, okay? So we're now on page 65 in the middle. Awakening cannot happen until we become capable of linking our activities of knowing and believing with our activities of recognizing and responding. Thus far, the human being could only evidence Jivan's 4.5 activities through recognizing and responding to the senses. Awakening is based on evidencing remaining 5.5 activities of Jivan in human behavior. That will happen only by way of knowing and believing. Nature, apart from the human being, remains regulated in course of their activities of recognizing and responding. It functions according to the law, and in that way it's orderly. The limit of sensitivity-based living has been reached in the animal order. Had sensitivity been the final destination of emergence in nature, then there would have been no need for the human being. There's nothing purposeless in the existence. All of existence as a whole is in the form of universality, consonant, and harmonious order. Each movement, each state, each order in existence is meaningful. This meaningfulness is in the form of being orderly and participating in the universal orderliness. When Jivan becomes awakened, Its realization, or anubol, and authenticity, pramanikta, becomes the basis of its understanding, bodh, and conviction, sankalp. And thereafter, the contemplation, chintan, and visualization, chitran, activities also start functioning accordingly. The same realization becomes the basis of deliberation, tulan, analysis, vishleshan, taste, asvadan, and selection, chayan, activities. Currently, we think and plan everything while considering sensitivity at the foremost value, while in awakening, it is values and evaluation processes which are everywhere. This itself is awakening in practice. Humankind has completed the task of developing their lifestyle based on sensitivity, wherein the needs of human being are understood to be in the form of objects from nature other than human being. For example, animal world, plant world, and mineral world. We know very well how human beings have treated these and how well we have succeeded in exploiting these. This success has resulted in an imbalance on Earth. Like this, our pursuit of luxury and possession has resulted in the Earth's distress. And now there's a question mark whether or not it will be possible to save the Earth. Human beings will have to stop the environmental crimes they've been committing, and they'll have to learn the crime-free way of living. It is impossible to accomplish this through which has entered into our education and lifestyle in the name of science. That route is heading towards a dead end since it's caused a destruction of the earth and conflict amongst human beings. So we'll stop there, okay? So what he's talking about here, if we have incomplete, so essentially, if we want to achieve, if we want to awaken our 10 activities, there's a necessity, he's saying, to align our knowing, believing with our recognizing, responding, okay? If we have our incomplete recognition of things, then that's going to result in incomplete fulfillment. So in delusionary phase, when we haven't the proper understanding, when we haven't awakened the 10 activities, then we are recognizing everything in light of senses. So we're recognizing things for fulfilling the sense of, not fulfilling the senses, for the senses, for the sensory domain, which has to do with my liking, what I don't like. And thus we start to recognize the relationships around us for those senses, okay? For what's comfortable for me, for what I like. Where there's another potential for recognizing relationships, for participating harmoniously in the system. So those are very two different paradigm shifts. One is recognizing relationship for senses, which is more aligned with the body, and the other one is recognizing relationships for participating in the system. Okay, and when we recognize relationships for the system, we now become useful. And if we want to recognize relationship for participating in the system, we need to ensure knowledge, knowing and believing. Those activities now need to be utilized. Knowing and believing is related to purpose. And this is now for the first time where purpose, or the big why, is entering and becoming the main driver. Before that, sensitivity is the main driver. Now we've got purpose that becomes the main drive. So human beings start to recognize that there is an underlying purpose in this coexistence. They recognize the necessity for undivided society and universal orderliness, or a universal harmonious system. So this is a huge paradigm shift. So we need to know and believe, and then according to that, we need to recognize what? My relationships in terms of that system. So knowing means I'm seeing the reality as it is, okay? Knowing has three aspects: knowledge of coexistence, knowledge of jivan, and knowledge of definite conduct, okay? It's the domain of Atma and Buddhi, and also, so it has to do with understanding, realizing, and evidencing, which are in those upper 5.5 activities that human beings right now are not even aware of. Believing has to do with now, when I've realized and I've evidenced and I've understood. Now I'm expressing that in my conduct through the 4.5 activities. So it's being expressed in my living, in my work, and in my behavior. And so now I've aligned. Now I see that there's I have a knowing. There's a knowledge of the reality as it is. According to that, there's a belief, which is now I've aligned all of my foreign activities accordingly. And now I can see my relationships. I can recognize my relationships instead of for senses, but I can see them. I can recognize for participating together in that system. Okay? And thus we can fulfill the relationship. Fulfillment means now we can participate in the system. If we recognize relationship for sensitivity, then we are able to participate harmoniously in the system, and we can see what is the result that we have received as humanity, or we have created as humanity when we look at all of the challenges that we're facing. So when we're living based on foreign affectivities, then naturally we're living with inhumanness, and that's very more in an individualistic way. And because we're living based on senses, it seems like we're all very different, and we come to kind of conclusion that we as human beings are all very different, very unique. And now when we foster a program based on awakening, it becomes a collective program. It's no longer individualistic. It's something that every human being can recognize, and we can relate with each other for fulfilling that aim. Okay, and now, because the main driver is no longer senses, the main driver is now values and evaluation become the main drive for human being. And so when we're talking about values, we're talking about universal human values, something that are innate and universal to all human beings, like trust, respect, affection, care, gratitude, and more. So those are kind of our innate expectations, our innate emotions, and then evaluation in the society. Right now, we use that term very loosely. We use the term kind of, we're at school, we're going to give an evaluation, which often means a test. And that has nothing to do with evaluation. Or sometimes we use it in light of, I want to evaluate how well I'm doing with math or a particular skill, something related to the doing. But if you look in the word of evaluation, we've got the word value. So evaluation has to do with recognizing the values in awakening process. I'm able to recognize those values. When we're living based on sensitivity-based living, the values are not able to emerge. So now we recognize relationships for the system. And that means I recognize I have very definite duties and responsibilities in my relationships with my mother and my father and my brothers and sisters, people in my family, people in my neighborhood. There's very defined duties and responsibilities for participating together in that system. And as we're participating together harmoniously in the system, and we're relating for that system, values start to emerge. And those values start to lead to mutual satisfaction and a sense of mutual trust and togetherness. And evaluation is that process where, how do I know that I've recognized my relationships in terms of system, or how versus I'm seeing my relationships in terms of senses? How do I know? And so evaluation is that process where I'm recognizing values, those values in relationships, and checking that they are leading to mutual satisfaction. So those are now becoming the main drive for human beings. Okay. So let's move forward. Page, I went back up. We're now on page 67 at the top. So many big nations have joined together and made a council called the United Nations, UNO. It had held many conventions until now, but it is yet undecided whether military options should reside with this union or with individual nations, or it should not be there at all. In the same way, they, UNESCO, review the state of education in the world every 4 years, but haven't come to a conclusion on what constitutes a good education for human beings. I have studied that every human child remains desirous of doing things correctly. They have the need to receive justice. A child speaks the truth. Children learn to lie as they grow up because it is impossible to not lie in the environment that we have built for them. The business world is steeped in lies. The rule of the state is full of lies. Education doesn't give rise to any truth. Where is one to go in this situation? The perplexed human being eventually settles into routine forced by circumstances. In this way, humankind as a whole could not reach any definite aim, nor could they ever in the future. Mega projects of large institutions and states have failed in rescuing humankind from this vicious cycle. The need for release from this vicious cycle is definitely there, but it can only happen when human beings become wise. Whenever this happens, it will only happen by way of humane conduct. The values and evaluation are to do with the natural way of coexistence. No laboratories are needed and no wars needed to be fought for this. Knowing and believing in relationships is necessary in order to recognize and respond with harmony there. Knowing and believing is only of the purpose. In the absence of knowing and believing, it is inevitable for human being to lose the way while recognizing and responding. For example, we missed in knowing the purpose of the environment and our relationship with it. As a result, we could not understand the earth and the wholeness of its environment, and thus have brought humankind to the verge of its total collapse. We need to be very clear that this proposal of Madhyas Darshan is meant only for course correction of humankind so they can continue living on earth. So if you look here, he's talking in the beginning about every child has 3 gifts. There's an innate want to live with justice, to speak the truth, and do kind work and behavior. And this is innate in every child, and we can all observe this for ourselves. Every child wants to do good. Yet, if you see in the society, due to a lack of system, lack of proper education that's conducive to making those happen for a child, children are not able to manifest it. So instead, the child is supposed to understand what is justice. They want to live with justice, but they don't know what is justice. They speak the truth, but they still haven't comprehended what is truth. And there's a desire to do kind work and behavior, but they need to understand what is kind work and behavior, and they need to see it in practice. And so due to a lack of system, lack of education, what ends up happening is that the children are not able to manifest and fully actualize those 3 gifts, those innate wants that they have. And each one of us, you can see in the society, there's a desire to be generous. But we're forced into a profit. We're compelled to live in this profit-based society. So we've got these circumstances that are compelling us, but at the same time, there's an innate want. And so human beings are kind of caught up in this cycle where we have this innate want, but not able to manifest this. So what is the solution for this cycle, which is now creating declination of the earth, and now it's questionable whether human beings and the planet can sustain? So here, he's now establishing the necessity. If we want a solution for this, there's a necessity to become wise, to live with wisdom. And wisdom has to do with, we have those 3 words, knowledge, wisdom, and science. So knowledge, again, has to do with, I have knowledge of the coexistence, knowledge of Jivan, and knowledge of human conduct. And based on that knowledge, now I can see that there's a very definite purpose and a definite aim. And I can align myself with that definite aim. With that definite purpose becomes a definite aim, definite expectations, definite program, and then we land at very definite results. Thus far, because we haven't been able to recognize that definite aim, we haven't recognized a definite purpose that we can all align our life with, what happens is we get indefinite results. We get the results that is not really what we want to see happening. And that's kind of what's happening to humanity as a whole. So wisdom is important for us to recognize a definite aim that is lined with coexistential harmony and be able to live my life according to that aim. And Nagaraj is saying that that aim, if you see, is resolution, prosperity, fearlessness, and coexistence. And when I am living with wisdom, now there can be a proper demarcation between right and wrong. Right now in the society, you can talk with many people. Some people say this is right. Another person will say that that same thing that is right is wrong. So we haven't had a proper demarcation line. For the first time with wisdom, we start to have clarity of what is right and what is wrong, because now we can see that in purview of system, how we can ensure an undivided society and a universal system or global harmonious system. Okay, and for that, there's a necessity for humane conduct, because humane conduct for the first time is where also I align my living with definiteness. And that definiteness is now I'm living with values, I'm living with character, and I'm living with ethics. And those 3 things are what bring a sense of orderliness within, orderliness within this family and the society, and orderliness or system in the environment and everything. So, and if we want to ensure wisdom, then we have to ask ourselves, what constitutes a good education? And that's another thing that society as a whole today, from the beginning of time till now, we still haven't figured out what is a good education for human beings. And we're, in the name of change and refinement, human beings have been trying to, as we change the education system, it's merely changing the outer superficial aspects of education, like the methodology. We're going to, instead of doing just sitting down traditionally at desk, now we're going to have a forest school system, or we're going to have an environmental-based approach, or we're going to have arts-based or community-based. You can change the methodology, and methodologies will need to be adapted and changed. But what constitutes a good education? For that, we need a proper study of human being and proper necessity of understanding what are the necessities of human being and recognizing human being as a conscious entity, as jivan. Then we can align that properly. And what we need is a consciousness development through value education. And there we can ensure a tradition of education where every child can live with wisdom. Okay, so let's move forward to, let me see, I lost my spot. So I think now we're on page 68 at the top. So human beings have been living in purview of sensitivity because of their delusion and not because of their awakening. They didn't find fulfillment in the purview of sensitivity. One who is unfulfilled can perform all sorts of wrongdoing. Awakening is about moving towards from unfulfillment to fulfillment, and fulfillment comes from right understanding. So right understanding is the eternal source of fulfillment. Jivan never dies. Fulfillment will come from the right understanding. Right understanding is the eternal source of fulfillment. Oh, sorry, I already read that. Jivan never dies. Once Jivan attains the right understanding of fulfillment, it then has the continuity of these thereafter. We have verified all these things on this basis. It has been proposed here that right understanding is the fundamental human right. In my view, every human being can accomplish this understanding, thereby determine their future and realize the magnificence of resolution. So I want to just stop here momentarily. Again, Nagaraj here is talking about human beings in light of sensitivity-based living. We are left unfulfilled and left with a whole series of problems and complexities. And so the answer to this, if we want to have fulfillment, we need right understanding. Okay, and for that we need to emerge all 10 activities. And he's saying right understanding is the fundamental human right. So if you see in society, how do people in society define what is a right? A right is usually, it's a key set of principles or rules of what is allowed for people in the society according to some legal system. But human right here, how Nagaraj is saying, is that right understanding, proper understanding is a right of every human being. It's something that needs to become in everyone's hands. It's something that's not, shouldn't be dependent on just external circumstances, but something that I have in my own hands. I've developed the ability to understand the reality as it is, and that becomes a part of my own right. And I can take that into my own hands, and I can have that understanding right here, right now. And for that, we need to emerge a proper education that's rooted in consciousness development through value-based education, a proper education and proper system where every child can have that right, where proper understanding, right understanding is now in their hands or in all of our hands, okay? So let's continue further, page 68 towards the bottom. Biological cells turn into fertilizer upon decomposition. Food turns back into food. That is the cyclical order in nature. Decomposed biological cells alone are the natural form of fertilizer. The biological cells get formed and biological organisms as plants, animal bodies, and human bodies decompose back into the soil, which is called fertilizer. The conditions for human beings' emergence occurred only after all of the fertility needed had become established on the earth. Ever since the human being emerged, they've been exploiting forests. With the advent of science, they've started exploiting the minerals as well. The disproportionate extraction of minerals and the cutting of forests led to the depletion of the very source of the Earth's fertility. Now, to the scientists who think they do such big service to the world by making chemical fertilizers, I say that the natural way of making fertilizer alone can save this Earth. The things which are not needed on Earth's surface, the rivers, carry them to the oceans. And so how will balance in nature come about? The balance in nature is only possible when there are dense forms of vegetation and forest on the Earth's surface. What are we doing? In the absence of right understanding, we try to solve problems by creating another. A problem, however, cannot cover up another problem. A small problem cannot cover up by a bigger problem. It is not a matter of complaining or condemning anyone. It is the account of the events that have happened, and it is the proposal for rethinking. This proposal is essentially about evidencing Jivan's all 10 activities in human living, which is to evidence right understanding via knowing, believing, recognizing, and responding. The point of fulfillment of knowing and believing is awakening, which is also called as realization. Therefore, the human being can make their life purposeful by way of living rooted in realization. So here he's talking about what is currently happening, what is currently evidenced, what is happening in our society when we're living a more sensory-based living. We can see that human beings are creating problems from the macro level to the micro level to the macro level. And we try to, as we're creating one problem, we're trying to solve it, but it's creating another problem, and it's a whole cycle. And he's also saying that human beings have been exploiting the earth always. It's not just something that's happening now. Of course, over time, it's been more exaggerated, and the deterioration is happening faster since the advent of science. But sometimes people think, okay, back in the days, there was no exploitation happen, but exploitation has been happening from the very beginning when human beings have been here on the planet. So, and he's talking about how we can ensure a balance on the planet. So what is balance? So balance is when we can ensure system within and participation in the system. So essentially ensuring system, continuity of that system, and tradition, where that system of harmonious coexistence can always continue. And so for that, we need a new proposal, a new way of thinking that allows us to live with wisdom, which allows us to consider the well-being of all. And for that, we require a proper understanding where now we can align our recognizing and fulfilling with our knowing and believing and start to awaken those 10 activities and moving towards fulfillment. And in light of that, if we're able to achieve that, then human beings will be able to show evidence of participating in system, which is going to ensure balance on the planet. Another good thing about this proposal, it has no place for priesthood, nor does it have any place for power-centric rule. It is also free from the idea that I am the only savior. Every person can be liberated from delusion via their achieving the right understanding. It has been seen that liberation of one person doesn't mean the automatic liberation of all. According to this proposal, anyone who understands the reality shall become liberated. The erstwhile holy scriptures are full of assurances, but not even a single person could become the evidence of what's written there. That which cannot be brought into a living tradition has no value. How can we testify to what someone in the past may have discovered? If the solution was discovered, then it has to be there in the living tradition of the present day. It can also be seen that the mistakes and crimes that human beings have committed in a course of history never took on the form of the living tradition. The living tradition can only be of the right understanding, which is the way human beings ought to live. The tradition of right understanding can be established by way of education. The art of living with right understanding can develop by way of family, by way of society, and by way of law and order. I too discovered my own art of living on the basis of right understanding. The art of living based on right understanding has to be about orderly living. So here he's talking about the necessity for tradition, the necessity for evidence. If we're talking about evidence, we're talking about 3 evidences, which is evidence of thought, behavior, and experimentation, okay? And in the past, we've learned to talk a lot and to give lectures and presentations, but without evidence. So the idea in the past until today, there has not been a proof of harmonious living. And this is the real work of human beings, to ensure tradition of human beings participating in that humane tradition. And for that, we require proper understanding. And that proper understanding needs to be passed on from one generation to the next generation. And how do we do that? Through education, through consciousness development, through value-based education. And so if we want to if we want to be liberated, we have all sorts of religious scriptures, or in the tradition, we've used that term liberation very differently, but what Einad is saying is liberation is essentially, we become liberated when we move from delusion towards understanding. And right understanding means now I can awaken all those 10 activities. And that itself, rather than living with 4.5 activities, now I move to 10 activities, that is moving towards liberation. I've been liberated. And that is something that every human being can achieve. And it's a natural process for human beings if we've set up the proper education. And tradition also, which is interesting, what he's talking about is tradition is what continues. So thus far, if you talk about what's happened from the beginning, human beings have been here on the planet till now, there hasn't been a tradition. And you can't say that there's tradition is of something that always continues, and problem does not always continue. So human beings have been increasing the complexity of challenges and problems living on the planet, but there's no tradition of it. You can see human beings are trying to refine it. It's not acceptable to us as human beings. We're trying to refine and improve because it's not acceptable. And if we want to have a tradition where we can say that there's a continuity of system on the planet, we need that right understanding, okay? So the human being doesn't become social until they have evidenced justice. And one who lacks justice will form sectarian division and never become free from argumentativeness. Conflict, exploitation, revolt, struggle, and wars are inevitable in such sectarian divisions. How can we believe that humans are social beings when there's so much dissent, conflict, revolt, and struggling among them? If we consider sectarian conflicts to be normal, then later on it is possible that we start considering individuals killing of one another, or even possible waging wars, to all be normal. That should also be permissible. Why do you restrain that? This issue needs rethinking. If we scrutinize this properly, we will find that whatever humankind could do until now, they could not cross the threshold of right understanding. It is only when we reach this conclusion that we will become ready to rethink. Thinking is natural for a human being. Every human being can think and explore right understanding. We need to become fulfilled from our exploration, and we also need to become resourceful in the exploration for fulfillment of others. Now, how do we begin from here? The first step is that we accomplish the right understanding. Once the right understanding is accomplished, our second step is to embrace the art of living with that right understanding. The art of living with that right understanding is about how we ought to live with the earth, with the plant world, with the animal world, and with all human beings. We cannot exclude anything as our living is linked with everything else. Every human being can realize and evaluate. Every human being already makes this claim. The tendency for making this claim is natural in human being. It is not an imposition. It is fundamental to human being. This is every human being's need. How could anyone expect to be savior of others when such a source is naturally present in every human being? It is incredible how all of us kept our faith in such assurances. Now we need to decide whether we want to anchor our faith or empty assurances on or our real life evidences. My tendency since the very beginning has been that the faith should be anchored on real life evidences. So that discovery naturally encouraged me. It is only in my search of real life evidences that I became ready to rethink everything. And whatever I found as a result, I'm putting forward to you. The way of all 7 billion people on earth are facing a dead end. It must have been the same way with me. You can imagine this. I was in the same situation as that of all human beings. I have been through the clutter of prevalent education, sanskar, and ritual systems, but could accept neither education nor sanskar from my tradition. I couldn't anchor my faith in either of these. This sense of there being a void because of this became the basis of my exploration for the universal purpose of the human being. My quest led me to accomplish the understanding of Jivan, or self. It is Jivan that is the bearer of right understanding, and I found the way to right understanding. We live with only 4.5 activities of Jivan in the purview of beliefs and faith. Faith means believing without knowing. That which we believe after knowing is called trust. So we'll end on this point. I'll just share a couple of things, and this is where we'll be ending for today and then continuing tomorrow. Essentially, today, Nagaraji is trying to help us recognize where humanity is as of today. As of today, humanity throughout the entire human history thus far, humanity is living in purview of sensitivity-based living. There's a necessity, which means only living according to our minimal potential, which is with our 4.5 activities. And there's a necessity for human beings to move towards awakening all 10 activities. And for that, we need living that's based on knowledge, wisdom, and science, okay? And sensitivity-based living has a very particular set of consequences or results, and knowledge, wisdom, and science it's aligned with a very definite purpose, definite aim, and ultimately definite results that are aligned innately with what human beings want to ensure, and that we can feel fulfillment if we're able to achieve it. And so for that, we require proper education. We need to move towards ensuring wisdom, and we need to align our knowing and believing need to be aligned with our recognizing and fulfilling. And what I just want to say is that I've had a lot of time where I've spent with A. Nagaraji, and what was always amazing to me, and it brings that sense for me again, reading here, being with Babaji, and when I was with him in the home, and I was, striving to read some of the books that he had written or spend time with him, I found that being in A. Nagaraji's presence, I always had this feeling that this is the most important thing in the world. There is a necessity. We need to emerge a humane tradition. We need to live based on knowledge, wisdom, and science. And this is really what matters. And I need to align my living there. He was always a source of a tremendous inspiration by how he lived, how he spoke. And it was always very humbling at the same time that he would always say to me, and I've heard him say to many other people, that this is something that not only I can live this way or understand, but this is something you can understand and you can also live this way. He always gave that assurance and sense of trust that this is something for all human beings. And this is the right, and it's natural for all of us. And so he created that sense of trust within me that I too can understand this. And being with him, and as I read this again, you feel that necessity that this is so important, and we need to move from our 4.5 activities towards our 10 activities where we can ensure our participation and orderliness. So I think we will close here for today. We will continue tomorrow with the same section of Jivan Constitution. And again, once again, I'll be here with you for 4 days. It's been wonderful to be here. Please forgive me for not forgive, but I haven't been sleeping so well these days for quite some time, with some challenges happening in my bodily system in terms of some sleeping just not able to happen with some hormonal changes in my body. So what's happening is I feel sometimes I'm stumbling on my words or not able to read properly. So I'm doing the best I can with my current circumstance. So it's been wonderful being here with all of you, and I wish you a beautiful evening or a beautiful day, depending on where you're at. And thank you again, Rakesh brother and Priyanka sister, for providing this opportunity to start with everyone here today. And we will see you tomorrow in the same place. So goodbye to everyone. Namaste, and have a great day.